Is this better? All right. So the year is 1991. I'm 20 years old, and I have just met my husband. I thought that I was the absolute luckiest woman in the world when I met him. Jeff was handsome, athletic, popular, had a great job, caring, funny, and he loved me. I thought everything was absolutely perfect. 2 short years later, we were married. In February of 1995, we bought our first house. And in early 1996, we had our son. I thought life was amazing, life was good. Because I had this identity of what I wanted my life to look like what Winston was saying. I wanted that white picket fence, happy life, fairy tale, romantic life that most of us women grow up thinking is supposed to be normal for us. And I wanted it all by the time I was 30. Well, by the time I was 26, in fact, 5 days after I turned 26, I had all of that, because that was the day that my son was born, and it was my trifecta that I had wanted. Okay, so you ready for the plot twist? By the time I was 32, I'd lost it all. I'd lost the husband, I'd lost the house, and now I was a single mom, but with split custody. February 2002 was the day that my new identity was born, because that was the day that I separated from my husband. And I became a struggling single mom. I was 32 years old. I was making less than $40,000 a year. I was getting absolutely no financial assistance from my ex-husband, but I was still trying to make sure that my son's life stayed as much the same as possible. I didn't want him to be affected by my decisions. Well, that did not work very well at all. It's very difficult to try to keep up with keeping up. And what ended up happening was I had resigned my life to basically struggling, financial struggle. I made a key decision in that moment that I would probably never be able to afford a house again. I would probably never be able to buy a new car, and definitely never go on a vacation. So now fast forward 10 years, I'm now $20,000 in debt. So not only had I lost everything, I'd actually gone backwards. So I had to file for consumer proposal, which is basically a bankruptcy. But I knew in that moment that that was the best decision for me. I needed to wipe that slate clean, pull up my big girl panties, and just, take that risk and go for it. So now fast forward, a few years later, it's December 31st, 2015. We got a December thing going here. I'm at home alone, and I'm writing out my New Year's resolution list, because this is something that I love to do. I love lists. I like to, write everything out. I even write things down so I can cross it off. Even if I haven't done it, I'll cross it. I'll write it down after I've done it so I can cross it off. But what's funny is that this list that I was writing was actually the same as the year before and the year before. So I wasn't actually crossing anything off of these lists. It was all the normal stuff that people probably put on a resolution list. Want to lose weight, get your finances in order, find your dream man. But obviously I wasn't doing a very good job. I was missing something. Something was missing, but I didn't know what. How could I possibly be still living the same life year after year if I wanted so badly for these things to be happening? And I heard this voice. All of a sudden this voice was screaming at me, I'm a struggling single mom. I realized in that moment that I was hearing that voice in my head for the first time, consciously hearing it. But as I sat there thinking about what was going on, I realized that I'd actually heard those words pretty much my whole life. I just hadn't been aware of them before. They had just been showing up for me whenever I needed them to show up. Anytime that I felt envious or jealous of somebody else, or I felt less than, these words would show up and let me off the hook, because then I didn't have to feel bad about my situation, because I was a struggling single mom. That was my go-to excuse to let me off the hook for everything. What I also realized in that moment, though, was I was thinking that this voice, this excuse that I had, was letting me off the hook. But what it was doing was actually allowing me to lower my standards and stay stuck. It was actually doing me a total disservice and not the service that I thought it was doing, or I had hoped that it was doing for me. So here's another funny thing. In that moment, on December 31st, 2015, I actually had a really good job. I wasn't struggling anymore. And my son hadn't even been living with me for 6 months. So that excuse of being a struggling single mom wasn't even valid anymore, but yet I was still using it to let myself off the hook for everything. So now what do? I don't even have an excuse anymore. Like, now what am I gonna do, right? Well, this was my breakthrough. This was my moment of truth. This is that moment when you have a decision to make, and you're either gonna go one of two ways. Well, I could either find a new excuse, or I could find a new way. Well, I was way too aware of what was going on at this point. And you cannot unknow something once you know it. So I was screwed. I had to now do something different. The problem was I still had absolutely no idea what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. So I went to the all-knowing Google, because we're buds. And luckily, I stumbled onto an amazing book by Jack Canfield called Success Principles. And I will tell you right now that that book changed my life forever. It is the best thing that ever happened to me. The book contains about 67 life principles, but all I needed was the first one. And if any of you have ever read it, take 100% responsibility for your life. That is principle number 1. Changed my life forever, because that is exactly what I had not been doing. Because I had kept letting that excuse come along, right? So I didn't have to take any responsibility. I'd been blaming my situation, I'd been blaming my ex-husband, I'd been blaming my parents, all my ex-boyfriends, and even my son. I decided in that moment that I was going to start living proactively and no longer reactively. And I was going to face life head on and take responsibility. I also realized that I've been reading a lot of self-help books most of my life, clearly not the right ones. And that I thought I already knew this stuff. So I think I was a little bit egotistical too, thinking that I already knew what I was supposed to be doing. Considered myself a little bit of a keener even on self-help. So I figured that if I didn't know this stuff and how to take responsibility and how to move forward in life, that the chances are the mass population didn't either. My friends certainly didn't. So that was the moment that I decided that I wanted to not only learn this for myself and change my life, but I wanted to teach other people. And that was when I became a coach. And I thank goodness in that moment that I realized the changes that were coming for me, because one of the best things that I ever did was I actually created a Facebook group called The Best Year of My Life 2016. And I was able to start documenting what was going on. And I've carried it on. Now it's Best Year of My Life 2018. I just keep it going. Because one thing I know for sure is that when you start to make changes in your life, you forget who you used to be. You can't even remember like what life was like once you break out of that shell. So having that to go back to has been really, really good for me, because it gave me a chance to see just how far I've come. So since then, I've actually managed to rebound from everything, all my debt. I'm now actually working with a real estate agent. I have hopes of buying a house in the next couple years. And I have an even bigger plan of moving over to the island. Probably 5 or so years down the road, I'm going to open a B&B. I'm going to run retreats. I'm going to continue to do my coaching. I've got big plans, all of which never would have occurred to me before this breakthrough moment. I would have just continued to resign myself. I've also managed to find the money to take my coaching certification. I just got back from Phoenix at an amazing event by Brennan Burchard. I'm going to Machu Picchu next year. All of these things that I've completely done, I've paid for with cash. I don't go into debt anymore. And I also no longer believe that anything that I want is out of reach. So anything that I want it doesn't even faze me anymore to try to find an excuse for why I can't have it. I just go for it. I find a way. You just have to learn how and carry on. So another really interesting thing for me is that I didn't have a voice for most of my life either. As a child, I was very introverted. I didn't know what the word introverted meant at the time. I just thought there was something wrong with me because I didn't like groups. I always kept very much on the outside. I played team sports, but I was always kind of just outside the main group. I never felt like I belonged, and I never wanted attention. And I just learned to accept this about myself. I didn't have anybody to explain to me what it was that made me feel this way. Maybe a couple of close friends, that's it. I would just sort of hang out with them. I really never went out, did much. In fact, about 10 years ago, I had a really good friend say to me that I wouldn't say shit if my mouth was full of it. And she was absolutely right. I was the epitome of a doormat. I let people walk all over me. Anybody needed anything from me, I was like, yep, there, doing it. Didn't matter if it was to my detriment, I was there, I did it. And it's not because I was such an amazing person. It was just because I was a people pleaser. I didn't know, didn't have my own power. I didn't stand in my own strength. I was like, yeah, okay, sure, anything you want. And I never had a voice. I never spoke up for myself. I never complained. And as you can see, I'm a little bit over that now. Don't mind the attention at all now. And I truly believe that the main reason why I've been able to get to the point where I'm standing here on stage in front of you tonight is because I finally believed in myself. I took little steps and I proved to myself that I could actually accomplish things if I wanted it. And what I have come to realize now, and Sita was there to witness it, is that I have a mission in life and I have a message. And so my mission is to empower women to find that true belief in themselves so that